Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Blue Baby. And I feel like because this is another run that's going to Mom's Heart, this is a good contrast to the one we had yesterday. I really feel like yesterday's daily was not only really good in terms of performance and just like how solid it was, but it wasn't too overbearing, and this one kind of felt the same. It was a really strong run, but maybe there were some little differences that I can point out, and maybe we can learn something from that. Like for example, both runs actually ended in Mom's Heart and didn't go to the Dark Room, and yet there was like a 4,000 point difference in the end score. And obviously a lot of that was just due to damage penalty and just due to how many consumables I found, but I still feel like there's some differences that are kind of warranted to be pointed out if you actually want to learn something. The very first thing I want to mention here is that very first pill room that we found on the very first floor. In that second secret room, there was like a room with like 10 pills in them. And I know a lot of people don't like pills. I personally really enjoy pills. I try to take them basically every time I can, and I do have like a separate video just saying how much I adore pills. But essentially what happens in that particular position, I feel like pills' usability and just how effective pills are, it becomes much better, because not only do you have only one pill that you have to take, but there are 10 pills in there, and I feel like there are a few factors at play here which make that particular room just a little bit better than just taking one random pill in any scenario. And how you have to look at it is, if the random pill is gonna have a positive effect, which is gonna have, like in the average case scenario, you're gonna have a net positive effect if you use a random pill. And if the more pills there are in a room, the more worth it actually is to take all of them. And there were a few other things that also happened that kind of made it a bit better. So like the first thing that we picked up was one of the, I think it was I'm Walking on Sunshine pill. It was the other one which also makes you invincible, which existed in the game, like the one from Arcade Kid. Essentially it makes you invulnerable. And why that is good is because if you take another pill, which happens to be like a battery pill or any other pill that can damage you, now suddenly you're invincible and you essentially negate all of those negative effects. So you're already off in a better spot, because you know if it is a negative pill, it's not actually gonna end up hurting you, but you're still gonna identify it. The second part is that there were a lot of duplicates. So if you do take a pill that has a duplicate, if it's a good pill, we can take it again, essentially getting 2 stat upgrades. And if it's a negative pill, then of course we can only take one and not take the other one. And not only that, because you identified the pill on the very first floor, it does allow you to kind of go through the rest of the run knowing what the other pills are, and of course that already gives you a benefit. But of course the third argument I would say is that exactly what I just said, it's that you found the pills on the very first first floor of the first room, that doesn't matter. So the very first floor, because you find them on the very first floor, that means that every pill you find beyond the first floor is also going to be already identified, or at least there's a good chance that it is going to be identified. And because we have the mom's dressing table now, it's much more likely for you to actually find more pills as a result. So having them identified is not only going to help you kind of min-max your decisions, maybe mitigate some damage, you're going to use it in the last second when an enemy is about to hit you, maybe play a blood bank that's going to allow you to get an IV back, and that's obviously a really good item, or just any other things, like the perk spill is going to be really helpful if you do find the sacrifice room, because that's going to mitigate your damage penalty, but essentially have and if you find like Andra's pill, you can use that on boss rush just to make it really easy. And of course all of those things are actually really big, and I know a lot of people maybe don't give it a lot of credit, but having those spells or knowing these effects in advance really does allow you to have some cool effects. And I would feel like in some situations some of these spells can actually end up being much more effective than just a random card is. Obviously a card is good because not only are they always positive effects, you always know what they're gonna do, but imagine if you knew what pills did ahead of time. Sure, you know, in some cases they would be a bad thing, but in majority of cases you're gonna find a pill. It's gonna be a really good pill, you're not gonna hesitate to take it because it's gonna be a really good stat upgrade, or you're gonna use it like in one of those situations I just mentioned, like the perks pill in the sacrifice room, and that is essentially gonna reduce your damage penalty in half, and that's such a good effect. And obviously the ability to identify all those pills on the very first floor, I really set the tone for the run. And it didn't really matter in the end because we did find starter deck later on, which did replace all of those pills with cards, but I still feel like just having the knowledge, or at least having the run start out that way, just kind of inspires you with confidence. You know that the run is heading in the right direction, and that's always a positive thing. And another kind of consequence of finding those pills in the very first floor allowed us to identify the majority of them. And of course, when you identify them, now suddenly you know which pills exist in the pool. So if there was like a perk spill, like I said, I probably wouldn't want to replace it with a card, just because of how effective it can be in reducing your damage penalty. But because I knew it didn't exist, or at least it wasn't likely that it existed because I identified so many pills, I didn't feel bad picking up the starter deck, because now suddenly, because even if you do replace it, it's not going to be that negative of an effect. So it had that side consequence of just giving us information. And information in a game like Isaac is so important, because it allows you to make informed decisions, and of course that can end up not only saving you the run, but also really helping you out on the long run. So after we got to that point, of course, we got a deck of cards. I was kind of on the lookout for some other things which might also help us out. And when you look at the run on its score, I feel like a few things come to mind. Like, for example, it's very important that we find a lot of spirit hearts. And of course, it's very important that we keep essentially 2 slots for 2 cards so we can actually combo them. But where I'm going with all of this, because it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, is at a certain point we found Mama Mega. And of course, what I thought Mama Mega would allow us to do is essentially explore the entirety of the Mom floor, use it at a certain point, and that would allow us to get to boss rush, essentially at our own leisurely pace. But what I figured it would be a better idea in this particular instance is not only to save it, because we need health, right? And in order to preserve health, I feel like the best way to use it would be on a harder floor and not on the Mom floor. Because I can go always back to the Mom floor, I can use a teleport card. There's a good chance if there is a restock machine in the shop, I can essentially buy a lot of spirit hearts in that particular shop and not worry for my health onwards. But of course, if I get hit on like Womb 1 and Womb 2, I have no way of restocking my health. So using Mama Mega on that particular floor I think would be a mistake. So there are 2 options that we can really take here. I feel like if we do make it to Womb 1, and if there is a sacrifice room, we can use a sacrifice room, go to the dark room and use it there. Because again, that way we mitigate damage, we make the dark room just a little bit easier. But if we do make it to Womb 2, then we can use the Mama Mega in that particular floor, because of course we can't bank on there being a sacrifice room. I mean, we can kind of risk it and then use it on the dark room if we actually get there, but I feel like it would be a waste. So it's just a better idea to use it at the start of Womb 2 and make that floor a little bit easier, because at that point we can't really restock our health, so we need to save it the best we possibly can. So using it on that floor, which is out of the floors that going to the Mom's heart the hardest and also the last one, I feel like it's just gonna be a net positive in terms of just how much damage we're gonna take, and of course we're gonna be able to preserve some of our health, because as soon as we enter the room, all of the enemies will die, and in some cases, obviously that can be a detriment, because some enemies explode in multiple tiers, and that can end up hitting you, but I think in the majority of cases it's gonna actually end up saving us some health instead of hurting us, because there are some really, really nasty rooms in the Womb 2, or the Utero 2, whatever, that can end up hitting you, and just having that offensive power to really instantly incinerate them is a really good thing. So at the end here, because there wasn't a sacrifice room, it turned out to be the right decision, at least what I did. I played some of the blood banks, tried to get some more swag by picking up the coins. I pick up the spirit hearts, the soul hearts, whatever, to kind of max out on that regard as well. And I just finished the run and pick up the trophy. And when you look back at the run, I feel like it was really one of those runs which was good, definitely a good run, but also it felt very satisfying. Like, I was comfortable with my decisions because I felt like I knew what was going on. There weren't hidden meanings. I didn't take a random bad triple which ended up costing me a devil deal or whatever, so it felt fair. And I feel like runs like this are very important for like the mental state of the player who's playing them. But of course, comparing it to the yesterday's one, I did take a little bit more damage penalty, like 1,000 more, and I did have a little bit of a lower swag bonus, but our exploration bonus seems to be about the same, which is, I think, a good thing. So comparing those 2 runs, I feel like the biggest difference is not only the overall power, but also comfort, and I feel like this run definitely was just a little bit more comfortable. Is this something that you can take off and maybe learn from? Probably not, but I feel like it's an interesting observation nonetheless. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.